redesign, or whether you want to kickstart your existing website, let us help. Mention WOCA and we'll give you a free, no-obligation search engine optimization report for your website. This free report will give you practical steps to increase your search ranking. It's our gift to you from Brick City Interactive. Call us today at 352-351-1131 or visit us online at brickcity.com.
Today, rather cloudy and seasonably warm. High getting up to 88 to 94. For tonight, cloudy with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm. Low 67 to 72. Cloudy day for tomorrow, couple of showers and a thunderstorm. High 71 to 85. Thursday night, rather cloudy with a shower or thunderstorm in spots. Low 66 to 70. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm Kevin Snyder.
WOCA. Ocala.
Listening to AIM Ocala Live. Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday, smack dab in the middle of the month, as we are now 6 minutes past the top of the 8 o'clock hours. We're moving through this week, through this month, to get to the other side of what might be some normalcy. But in doing so, we've got Life South Community Blood Centers on the phone. We got our friend Galen. Good morning, Galen.
Hey, good morning, Adam. How are you, my man?
I'm doing pretty good. It's saying on the weather there, overcast, but I'm starting to see some blue sky and some sun. All of the rain, though, that they were forecasting. If I'm a betting man, I'm not taking the odds. After yesterday and seeing what I'm seeing on radar this morning, to hell with it, with the idea of rain. Let it just happen. Let it do its own thing. I'm over the weather for a day and a half at least.
Sure, absolutely.
No,
absolutely.
But I was going to say I'm doing pretty good here, as like we said, we're moving through the week, and before we got on the phone with you here after the top of the 8 o'clock hour, we had to cut our caller off there just a little bit short as we were getting ready to take our break. But she made a good point, and it's actually something that was in tune with what you said yesterday, because I had just read the article from the USA Today with President Donald Trump kind of pushing the conversation about, and he's doing it in Trump style, with the idea of what he considers absolute power in the presidency to say, hey, when I say it's time to reopen, we're going to reopen. But at the same time, it's truly just to get the conversation rolling for the governors of the states to say, hey, this is something we should start looking into. And what she was in agreement with you was just how comical some of these press conferences get, considering that the media takes themselves so seriously.
And I kind of get it. I mean, they think they're incredibly important. I mean, if you were to probably have a one-on-one conversation with these national press reporters who cover the White House, they think they are on the front lines. They think that their job is life and death, and that what they say and what they report has a major impact on people's lives, because they're in a bubble. They're in that D.C. bubble where people recognize them and they follow them on social media, and it's all of those things, and so they get really self-important.
Yeah.
And I told you off air. I had somebody yesterday who said, "But what the president says matters. Lives depend on it." I'm like, "No, they don't. No, they don't. Lives depend on what actions he takes.
Right.
At most." This is, it's again, if you sit there and you watch Trump and you hang on his every word, you need a job. You need a distraction. You need to go for a walk. You need a hobby of some kind. You need to volunteer. You need to fill up your time more. Just ignore it. I laugh at it most of the time. So, again, it's all how you want to look at it.
Yeah. No.
But people are used to the president standing up there and reading a script and, using the perfect words and all these colorful analogies. And Trump just says whatever comes to his mind. And he doesn't like the reporters, so he talks directly to the people as much as he can.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Now, going back to the point she was making before the top of the hour, she was basically saying, and you could agree to this too, that the media doesn't seem to ever bring questions to light that move things forward, to maybe see some things get done or give credit to a point to make things more positive to move through. It's always a doom and gloom, and it's almost to the idea. And I was thinking about this when she said it. It's as if a reporter in media, and how a lot of themselves take themselves so seriously. It's like an attorney who's like irrelevant questioning and badgering of the witness every single day, every single press conference, every single article.
I will say this. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of great questions that get lost in the shuffle because it doesn't make the highlight reel. Right?
Of course, that's a great
highlight reel.
That's a great point.
What makes a highlight reel for Trump is when either you catch him, which is nearly impossible because he would never admit it, or when he catches you. Right. There are some good questions that are asked.
Absolutely.
And he answers them. Sometimes he can't. There was one the other day, and I'm like, oh yeah, he should have answered that, but he never, and he really didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's going to happen. But because the relationship is where it's at, let's be clear, it's pretty damn contentious. This is what we're getting. Whether we like it or not, the Trump, and I really believe that one of the reasons he won is because he just called out the media and said they're fake, and I think that sings to a lot of the American people who believe that people on TV don't have any idea of what their life is really like and don't represent who they are. So, and I think he won. That's partly why he won. So, and it's not going to change. And then the media is trying to get more clicks by being tough on Trump, and it's just this circle thing. It's not going anywhere.
No, it's not. And then also,
yes, they treated Obama differently. That's undeniable. It's just that's the way it is. I mean, it's the way it's always been, probably always will be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, with that, too, I can agree that it almost feels like with everything that had come through and how we're dealing with the coronavirus and the information that come from the beginning of the year about it's almost like that was its own, like they kind of dug themselves their own hole because there was such a convolution of misinformation out there. And then it became argumentative about what agenda they were trying to push, the media themselves, the agenda that they were trying to push about how serious this could be. And then the minute that it was a decision to say, let's stop this or let's put a travel ban here, it became basically they're the ones who made it more political than it needed to be based on, like you said, trying to get a gotcha or trying to get a click or trying to get, the headline, if you will. And I think it was more apparent, especially during this time, because, it was a crisis and still is in itself right now. And I just, like I said, what got this conversation rolling was the idea that now the president's starting to think about, okay, let's put people back to work. You've been saying that from the beginning.
Well, again, you cannot question the doctors, right? You cannot, for some reason, people that are above board, even though every one of these models has been dramatically off. I was watching CNN just because I like to watch their coverage of during the press conference to see when they decide to click it off. And they had somebody on, and they were discussing this report out of Harvard that said that the social distancing and shutdown should last until 2022.
What?
And my son walked by, and he's like, they're going to shut this down to 2022? I can't go to school for 2 years? And then he's like, what am I going to do? How am I going to play basketball? Right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, son, ignore that. But that's an example of just shoddy journalism. I mean, the kid is 16. He's, I don't care what you say. No 16-year-old should ever have the right to vote because, they're just not very smart. But again, that's an example of, how misinformation and fake news can really happen. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that was this one study that said if they really wanted to deal with the virus that's how they would deal with it, just shut everything down. And I'm like, okay, that is terrible in every sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's that's what happens.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
I don't know. Now, let me ask you, partner, in your line of work, because you deal with a lot of healthcare officials
Sure.
very often.
Sure.
What's the conversation been like with, even to the idea of the elected surgeries down to how we've talked about numbers and capacity of hospitals? What's the conversation been like for the health officials that you deal with? Kind of now thinking about, hey, we're halfway through April. All right, things are starting to yield a little bit more of a flattened curve idea. So what are they saying about coming through the end of this?
To be honest with you, they're trying not to go broke.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rural hospitals who this is just crippling. And again, elective surgeries are the bread and butter, and the meat and potatoes and everything but the dessert for a lot of these facilities.
Yeah.
And when you take out those, that's going to have a massive impact on their revenue. And whether you believe it's true or not, hospitals have to be able to at least break even in order to survive. Even the nonprofits have to survive, right? Or there is no blood supply.
Yeah.
So that's the underlying issue is they've got to open them up. And I'm kind of glad Trump left it up to the governors.
Yeah.
I'm not very glad that the problem is in Florida, it's such a massive state,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That, I hope he opens it up by county. Because if you look at
Right.
the cause of this coronavirus by county, it's completely different
Right.
than anything else. So we'll see how he handles it.
Yeah.
He's going to get killed no matter what he does.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks he's a whatever Trump's going to do, he's going to do, and that kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, Florida's a little bit different. I mean, we're pretty big, just size-wise and population-wise.
Right.
We have a lot more in common with California than we'd probably care to admit.
Yeah.
But that's the big issue right now, isn't it? To see how we're going to handle it.
Yeah. And like you said, we are different, and that's how each state is different. When you look at the size of a Delaware, Rhode Island, and their expectations of where their numbers were and what their state can do and their governor and the decision of. But yeah, and the idea of Florida, California, and I think it was reading the article that it's almost like they've kind of come together between, I think it was Oregon, Washington State, and California because of the idea of how close they are to the numbers they've had and the expectations of it. So you're right. It's a state-by-state thing, and that's what's important there. And I think you're also a little bit right. I think we are a little bit more like California than we'd like to admit. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's as long as the conversation's getting started about it. It may be argumentative in the beginning and back and forth like it is, and the media's trying to force some things, but I'm happy that the conversation is getting rolling. That was what I was looking forward to at this point in April, as we talked with County Commission last Thursday and Mark Lander from the Department of Health of Marion County. The numbers they're pretty pleased with, as much as the projections that they were looking to do and plan for. The big date is the middle of next week, and truly see where we're at with it. But as long as we're getting the conversation started, then that means May is not out of the picture.
Right. That's absolutely correct. Sure.
So,
Sure. Why not?
Yeah. So with that being said, I'm going to give a shout out to our sponsors here real quick. Palm Garden Health and Rehabilitation Center. I'd like to thank Palm Garden Health and Rehabilitation Center, located at 2700 Southwest 34th Street. They offer skilled nursing, physical, occupational, and speech therapy. Sometimes when I read this, I think I need speech therapy. If you have any questions on how they're handling COVID-19, give them a call, 352-854-6262. That's 854-6262. Family-owned and operated, serving Marion County for over 30 years, is our other good sponsor, and our friends, Penn Flooring. Every bit of their success is to unrivaled customer service, and they're found at 1201 Southwest 17th Street in Ocala. 352-351-3420. That's 351-3420. So Penn Flooring and Palm Garden Health and Rehabilitation Center. Now, with the segue of the decision of the governors per state, I want to throw this one out here. WWE. Florida governor deems WWE essential. So we've got something to look forward to.
Well, and I read this and I'm like, wait a second, what's he doing here? And then I read, he's just going to allow them to tape here.
Yeah.
I'm like, why not? It's an empty coliseum.
Exactly.
It's a sound stage. Yeah, go for it.
Exactly.
Go for it. That's what I would say to that. Yeah.
Yep.
The one of those where the headline kind of got lost in the story. So yeah, I'm all for that. I have no problem with that.
They even try to throw there. This comes after WWE on-camera employee tested positive for COVID-19 in March.
Sure.
WWE made the announcement this past weekend saying the employee has made a full recovery.
Sure.
But
sure. I don't doubt that for a minute.
Yeah. Have you had conversations?
I don't watch WE.
I don't either.
I don't care. I don't really care.
Have you talked to some people through the midst of this that? Could you say that there's some people you may have talked to that have had the conversation that we don't know, but maybe at some point since the beginning of the year, some people have said maybe I had COVID-19 and I got through what it was a tough cold and come out the other side and realized that maybe that's what it was months later. Have you talked to a lot of people like that? Because I'm starting.
Yeah, it seems like everybody thinks they had it.
Right. I was going to say it's to a point where, and I guess it's the symptoms and the asymptomatic symptoms, but it's one of those things where a lot of people I talk to, when you really start to break it down, at some point it feels like most people have felt some kind of cold or been under the weather since, at some point from where we're at now to the beginning of the year. At some point it feels like somebody I talked to was sick. And I think that was interesting because a lot of people do, like you said, start to think, well, maybe I had it. And if that's the case, that's what makes this so, what's the word? Basically,
it's in the water supply, man. I mean, it's in the waste supply. It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
I will tell you on a couple of notes is Life South. We're starting to test for the antibodies in a select few of our blood donors. So
yeah,
not on a mass scale because we just don't have the resources, but on a mass scale, yeah.
And that would tell whether or not somebody did have it if they didn't know it, right? And that's important too when we start to talk about if you know you had it, if you had tested positive, also to get over there and with the antibodies and all that. But it is funny considering just how much we've done, to circumnavigate, flatten a curve, whatever you want to call it. But in some reality, it feels kind of crazy that a lot of us probably have had some symptoms or, like I said, felt that we've had it, or somebody had been under the weather within the last few months that could say, is that contributed to that? But then again, that's where it's like, hold on, zoom out. We've got numbers that say so many people are diagnosed with it, and there's actually people that are dying from it. And I think it's crazy because, again, when you hear some of the articles, and I wanted to bring this up to you, is I read another article, and it's what you touched on a couple weeks ago, and it was kind of a exclamation point, like a red flag for me when I was reading an article, and I think it was, I don't know if it was our state or it was another state, but the idea of counting people dying from unrelated things to COVID-19, but calling it COVID-19 because of the dollar signs that come away with hospitals getting reimbursed for dealing with the virus and having changed things like they have. That there's actually articles out there that tell you that there's a dollar sign attached to a COVID-19 death, and I think that's kind of crazy in itself, and you don't hear that get asked very much or talked about, even though it's out there.
They're not going to, and who's going to talk about it? The
Right.
media's not going to talk about it.
They're not going to talk about it.
Not going to talk about it. The
Right.
CDC's not going to talk about it. That's where all the funding's coming from. The CDC is not talking about how they're now tracking people who have been tested positive with results and everybody they talk to, and because the federal government under this bill that was passed to act as an economic recovery gave them access to all that information, and they can now tap into it. They're working with Google and Facebook and other companies. I'm not going to tell you that.
Right,
and
right.
The government is huge, and they have to feed the beast.
And
so
this
is the way they make it bigger, and this is the way they get the government. What they'll say is the reason why we pay per case is so that we get the true numbers and it's actually reported. Right? That's what they'll say. They'll say it's under the guise of, well, it costs them to report this data. It's very important. It helps us handle and how we're going to deal with this virus. And the reality is it gives them more power and more control. The more deaths you get, the more money you get. Right?
Yeah.
The bigger the deaths, the more government the federal government gets. It goes round and round and round.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, and I think that was something that I thought was worth bringing to the table for conversation, because like I said, I've read a few articles, and they're good sources from where they come, about somebody goes in with a gunshot wound, struggles for about a week with complications. Within that time, had contracted COVID-19, has nothing to do with the tragedy of their death as they were battling the gunshot wound, and the next thing you know, it's COVID-19 death.
Right. And that's going to happen. Again, it's dollars.
Yeah.
And it's probably the money talks. I don't care what you're talking about. It talks. And if you're a struggling county right now, or a struggling state, and you can get X number of dollars from the federal government to help you through this, guess what you're going to do? And if you look at, like, there's a massive hotspot in Albany, Georgia. Albany, Georgia is a tiny little town. I've been there multiple times. I've talked to the hospital there many times, and they can relate their hotspot and everything they're going through to 3 large funerals that happened, where one person had it and just spread it, and that's how the whole town got it. Now, it's an event like that you look at it and go, oh my gosh, that's how absolutely contagious this virus is. But this was in February, before anybody really knew it was that bad. The person had traveled, who got the disease and brought it home to Albany, Georgia.
Yeah. And it's, like we said, it's just crazy altogether. One last thing, partner, before we come to the bottom of the hour, I wanted to throw this at you, just a real quick opinion on it. But the NFL draft prospect Zach Bond had a diluted drug test sample at the NFL Scouting Combine report. And I wanted to bring this up because at the end of the day, this is the clickbait shock jock stuff, and ESPN and sports have nothing else to report on here. So it basically brings it down that they've notified the NFL that this is a diluted urine sample in the NFL Scouting Combine, which is a red flag and pertains to a league drug testing mechanism. And I'm going to say this because this whole urinalysis stuff is so ridiculous, but they deem anything that has you drinking too much water and not enough creatine in your urine to place a certain average within the urine to do the test, that it could deem it too diluted. And most of the time, they see a diluted test as a positive, as you're trying to cover something up. And I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, how did something like this get an entire article in national news for a kid who had a diluted drug test? Like, if it comes back full blown positive with illegal substance, I get it. But diluted urine sample makes national news?
It's a positive test. I mean, that happens if you're at an employer.
Yeah.
And you get a diluted test.
Yeah.
You get fired.
Yeah.
That's a bigger issue. And then the NFL, their mindset is this, because I've talked to the NFL about it. Their mindset is if before the biggest moment of your life, the thing that you've been dreaming of since you were, 8 years old in a lot of cases, and even younger, you take that opportunity and you get high and you blow it for pot. What kind of decision maker are you?
Yeah.
Can I trust you with millions of dollars?
Yeah.
Can I trust you with the and again, these players have they have the whole franchise in their hands, right?
Right.
And so if a player turns out to be a drug addict or has problems, that looks really poorly. It hurts ticket sales. It has a massive impact on the whole team and the whole franchise. So they're going to move on and go to the next guy.
Yeah.
It's not that big a difference from your second round pick who's picked, 45th and the guy who's picked 46th. It's just not that big of a difference.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much, partner. We're coming to the bottom of the 8 o'clock hour. Good stuff, man. We'll talk at you tomorrow, buddy. You take her easy.
All right. Sounds good, man. Bye, all.
And WOC Ocala will be back right after this.
It's coming.
Probably on Thursday, a meeting by teleconference, and a lot of things will be discussed, and some of the details will be discussed.
He also lashed out at the World Health Organization for mismanaging the pandemic.